Hi, I'm Delphine. My sister lost $300,000 gambling, and my mother's response wasn't shock. It was a smirk and 7 words that rewired everything I knew about family. She pays or she leaves. That she was me. They tried to co-sign me onto their debt, forge my name on a loan, erase me from family photos, and still had the nerve to call me ungrateful. They didn't just betray me, they branded me. But what hurt most? It wasn't the money. It was realizing I was only family when they needed a bailout. How do you forgive a mother who weaponized love to cover her daughter's addiction? Or a sister who gambled your silence like it was always guaranteed? And when I made them beg me for rent, was it revenge or just the first boundary I was ever allowed to draw? I pulled into the driveway just after 3:30. The sun was dipping but still stubborn, casting a hot glare off the windshield. The house looked the same, white siding, hydrangeas slightly overgrown, porch swing unmoved. But there was something about the air, the way the wind didn't move, that told me this wasn't just another backyard Sunday cookout. I walked in through the side gate and found everyone already seated. Mom stood at the grill, though nothing was actually cooking, talking low to Bryony. The moment I stepped into view, their heads snapped toward me, then separated, just like that. Delphine, Mom said, wiping her hands on a dish towel she wasn't using. You're early. I'm exactly on time. I kissed her cheek. She flinched, barely covering it. Bryony gave me a one-armed hug and went right back to her phone. Plates were set, salad half-dressed, corn still raw. The silence wasn't tension, it was caution, controlled, calculated quiet. James, my brother-in-law, cleared his throat from the far end of the patio. Things got out of hand this time. He let the words fall between bites of chips, like that would cushion them. I sat, smile pasted on. What got out of hand, James? He blinked, eyes darting to Marigold, our mother, then mumbled something about heat and humidity. I didn't push, not yet. When Mom finally brought out a tray of iced tea, I noticed her hands trembled ever so slightly. That wasn't normal. She didn't get nervous. Not when she spoke at church, not when Dad died, not when Bryony crashed her third car in high school and Mom stood in front of the insurance agent like nothing happened. I took my glass but didn't drink. Something was coming. We were clearing plates when I pulled her aside. What's going on? She didn't answer at first, just reached for the leftover rolls and wrapped them methodically in foil. I waited. She finally looked up. Your sister made a mistake. I folded my arms. What kind of mistake? Financial. She said the word as if she were saying minor inconvenience. How bad? Marigold sighed. 300,000. I blinked. $300,000? Gambling, she added, like it was an afterthought. Online poker, casino apps. It snowballed. I stared at her. And you're just telling me now? I didn't want to ruin the afternoon, she said flatly. No apology, no regret. My jaw tightened. You didn't want to ruin it, but you brought me here anyway? You had to know sometime. The image of Bryony, carefree and glued to her phone, buzzed in my head. Memories flooded. Mom signing her up for private ballet lessons while I got hand-me-down cleats. Bryony's spring break in Aruba, mine spent shelving produce. I should have been shocked. I wasn't. After dinner, as the sky turned lavender, Marigold gestured toward the porch chairs. Let's sit, she said, like it was about to be some gentle mother-daughter chat. I obliged. She poured herself tea, slow, precise. Delphine, she began, Bryony's going through something. It's not just gambling, it's stress. Her divorce, her job. She hasn't worked in 2 years, I cut in. Exactly, she replied. And the financial strain. I raised a hand. What do you want? She set her cup down, looked me square in the eye. It's simple, hun. She pays or she leaves. I blinked. She? Marigold smiled, cool as a whisper. You, Delphine. We need your help. We'll lose the house if this isn't covered. My stomach dropped. Not from surprise, from insult. You expect me to pay her gambling debt? It's a family matter. We help each other. No, I said. You help her. She took a long sip and smirked. She's your sister. I stood. Apparently, that makes me her safety net. You're the one who's stable, she said, as if that were a flaw. I didn't yell, didn't cry. I just left her sitting there with her china cup and her entitlement. I shut the door to my old bedroom. It wasn't mine anymore. The posters were gone, replaced with old linens and unopened boxes. My childhood trophies were nowhere in sight. There was a treadmill against the wall, covered in dust. I sat on the edge of the bed. The room smelled faintly of mothballs and lavender. I remembered skipping school dances to babysit Bryony, working part-time at the grocery store so I wouldn't have to ask for money. Watching Mom cheer for Bryony at her college graduation while saying mine was too far to drive. I picked up my phone, typed, New Jersey family member gambling debt law. Scrolled, searched, bookmarked 3 articles, opened my banking app, reviewed savings, retirement, property equity. I wasn't angry. I was calculating. The next morning, I woke before everyone, made coffee, fed the dog. Marigold shuffled in, hair pinned up, robe pressed. We'll talk later about the options, she said, pouring her cup. Sure, I said, smiling. Let me know when works. She nodded, unaware I'd already made my choice. At noon, I texted Soraya. Lunch tomorrow, legal consult. She replied in seconds. Always. You okay? Getting there, I wrote. I spent the rest of the day packing, every move methodical. I opened a new file on my laptop. Boundary Project. Inside, I wrote, You teach people how to treat you by what you allow. Tony Gaskins. Saved. Backed up. Password protected. On my way out the door the following morning, suitcase in hand, Marigold stopped me at the threshold. Remember, Delphine, family is about sacrifice. I looked her dead in the eyes. I agree, I said. That's why I won't be yours anymore. Bryony was still on the couch, pajama-clad, scrolling through her phone, oblivious. I stepped outside. The air hit me harder than I expected, warm, heavy, but different, like something had finally broken loose, and I realized then that $300K wasn't just a number. It was going to cost them a hell of a lot more than money. The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled into the driveway again. I hadn't planned on returning so soon, less than 24 hours after that twisted dinner. But I'd forgotten a folder in the side office that I needed for Monday. That was the excuse I gave myself anyway. The truth. I needed to see it again with clear eyes, not through the blur of shock. The house felt quieter this time, but not peaceful, like a silent war had already been declared and I had just stepped onto enemy soil. I rang the bell out of politeness, but nobody answered. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air was thick. Marigold was in the kitchen, sipping her second cup of morning tea. She didn't lift her head when I entered. Bryony sat at the counter, casually scrolling her phone, legs crossed like nothing had happened. Forgot something, I said, gesturing toward the hallway. Marigold nodded, but her eyes never met mine. I left it on your bed, she said without inflection. I paused. My bed. I walked down the hall slowly. My old door, still with the faded brass nameplate that read Delphine, was ajar. The faint scent of lavender sachets drifted out, but something else clung to the air. Finality. What used to be my sanctuary was now a guest room, sterile, impersonal. In the center of the bed sat a cardboard box, taped shut, labeled in Mom's block handwriting, Delphine. Taped on top was a note, thin and razor-sharp. This room is for paying guests only. I stood still, the words hitting me not like a punch, but like a long, slow bruise spreading across my chest. They hadn't just dismissed me, they'd reclassified me. I peeled back the flaps. Inside, a tangle of my past, old sweaters, a couple of high school notebooks, a photo frame turned face down, not a single item wrapped or protected, just dumped. I carried the box back to the living room, set it gently on the coffee table. Marigold looked up. Oh, honey, I just needed the space. It's not personal. Not personal? I asked. She gave a small laugh. We've had guests lately. You know how it is. Bryony didn't even look up. I was here last night, I said. And now you're not, she replied, still holding her teacup. Let's not make this bigger than it is. I nodded, lips pressed tight. I said nothing else. The silence said more. As I stepped outside, box in hand, Aunt June walked by with her purse and iced coffee in tow. She waved, paused at the driveway. I heard you're not helping your sister, she said, her voice heavy with insinuation. That's de cold, Dell. I blinked. Excuse me? Well, family's family, she said, shifting her bag. You're doing well, she's struggling. And? I said evenly. She shrugged. Some people expect help, especially when it's blood. I didn't respond. I watched her walk off, the gravel soft under her sandals. The gears clicked. Marigold hadn't wasted any time. She wasn't just painting me out of the picture, she was already repainting the frame. The following morning, I met my cousin Natalie for brunch in town. Neutral ground. Or so I thought. We were barely through the first round of coffee when she leaned forward. I mean, Bryony's sick. You're doing okay. You could help her out. I tilted my head. Sick? She's under pressure. Divorce, debt, you know. And gambling 300 grand, I said. Natalie exhaled like I was the unreasonable one. Dell, come on. She's your sister. No, I replied. She's an adult who made choices, and I'm not an emergency fund with a heartbeat. She frowned. You used to be more understanding. I smiled. No, I used to be quieter. The rest of the meal was tight-lipped and awkward. We didn't order dessert. Driving home, I played the conversation in my head like a bad voicemail. Every word laced with a script I'd heard before. She's your sister. She's going through a lot. You're the strong one. It always boiled down to the same thing. If you're doing okay, you owe it to the ones who aren't. Funny how that logic never applied in reverse. That night, my phone rang at 11:08 p.m. Marigold. I stared at the screen for a moment before picking up. Delphine, she began, her voice softened like she'd practiced. I've been thinking, maybe I came off harsh. I said nothing. It's just, I remember when you were little, always helping in the kitchen. So kind. I waited. I don't know what's changed. I almost laughed. Nothing's changed, I said calmly. You just ran out of ways to use me. There was silence. Don't say that, she finally whispered. Then stop proving it, I replied, and hung up. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after. I didn't cry. I opened my laptop, titled a new document, Family Ledger. I began to list every dollar, every hour, every favor. Not for revenge, not for guilt. To remember. Because sometimes the line between generosity and exploitation gets blurry when people call it love. The next morning, as the sun slipped through the blinds, I checked my messages. Group text from the family. Disappointment, shame, blame, wrapped in passive-aggressive punctuation. We're disappointed, Delphine. Your mother is heartbroken. Family always comes first. No one asked if I was okay. No one asked what really happened. I hit leave conversation, then opened a new group thread, named it Exit Strategy. Scrolling through Facebook, I wasn't expecting much, just the usual stream of recipes, grandkid photos, political rants from high school classmates I never unfriended. But one post stopped me cold. A family photo from the barbecue. The caption read, Blessed beyond measure. Nothing like having your people around you. There was Mom in her floral blouse, Bryony in the middle like she always was, even James looking semi-sober for once. A few aunts and cousins rounded out the group, all smiles, all posed. I wasn't in the picture, not cropped, just never called over. I remembered holding the salad bowl, standing just off frame, waiting for someone, anyone to say, Dell, come be in the photo. No one did. I didn't even realize they'd taken one until now. It's a strange kind of pain, being forgotten so efficiently that even your absence feels planned. I stared at the image longer than I meant to, then shut my laptop. The silence in my apartment suddenly felt deeper. You can't erase someone who was never allowed to exist fully in the first place, I murmured aloud. My own voice echoed back at me like a confirmation. Later that night, I sat on the couch with a cup of peppermint tea and let my mind drift into places I usually locked away. The flashbacks weren't dramatic, no screaming, no obvious slights. Just absences. My high school graduation. Mom had said she was too tired to come. Bryony had a dentist appointment, and someone had to drive her. So I walked across that stage, accepted my diploma, and looked out to an empty row where my family should have been. When I got my first job offer, a finance position I'd dreamed of, no one picked up the phone. I left voicemails. No one called back until a week later. Bryony had gotten engaged, so, of course, everyone was busy. And there was that one Christmas. I'd bought everyone gifts, carefully wrapped and labeled. When it came time for me to open mine, it was a clearance rack coat 2 sizes too big. Bryony got an iPad. These weren't wounds, not on their own, but together they formed a slow decay, like soft rot creeping beneath the floorboards of memory. I opened my journal and wrote, "Rejection doesn't always come in shouts. Sometimes it comes in silence." 2 days later, I drove across town to my storage unit. I hadn't been there in months, but something told me the answers were buried under dust and bubble wrap. I found the bin labeled Photos Early Years. I carried it to the front of the unit, sat on the concrete floor, and started pulling out albums. One by one, I flipped through the pages. Birthday parties, vacations, school events. And yet, in so many photos, I was either behind the camera or on the edge of the frame, half cut out, blurry, forgotten. The captions written by Mom in her bold, curling letters. Bry's 7th birthday, such a joy. James, the cousins at the lake. My name appeared maybe 3 times, always in passing, never central. I snapped a picture of one page and sent it to Soraya. Am I imagining this? I texted. She replied almost instantly. Even ghosts need permission to haunt a house. It wasn't just one picture, it was a pattern. I wasn't simply excluded, I'd been positioned outside the narrative from the start. Later that week, I ran into Layla, my cousin, at a cafe downtown. We exchanged awkward smiles before she approached. Hey, Del, you look good. You too, I replied, bracing for the conversation I didn't want. We made small talk. Weather, work, her dog. Then, just as I was about to excuse myself, she said it. You know, Aunt Marigold once said you were kind of adopted at heart. Always a little distant. I blinked. Adopted at heart? She waved it off. She didn't mean it like that. Just, you always kept to yourself. That one sentence hit harder than I expected. It wasn't just that I was seen as difficult. I was seen as not belonging. Layla must have noticed the shift in my expression. It was just a joke, she said quickly. Of course, I answered, but my mind was racing. They weren't just sidelining me, they were rewriting me. Back in therapy the next day, my counselor asked, "When was the last time you felt chosen in your family?" I didn't answer right away. The silence hung between us like fog. That night, I opened the Notes app on my phone and started typing. Narrative theft. Underneath, I listed every moment I could recall where my presence had been dismissed, my contributions erased, my identity minimized. Bryony's art show, Mom's Facebook post said, "Proud family moment," yet didn't mention the fact I'd funded the entire thing. Dad's funeral, where I was seated behind a potted plant while Bryony gave the eulogy, despite being estranged from him for years. Each line on the list wasn't meant to reopen wounds. It was meant to name them. I didn't cry. I formatted. Bolded. Numbered. This wasn't grief. This was a paper trail. That evening, I stood in my kitchen holding 2 photos I'd printed from the old albums. One where I was visibly cropped out, the other where I was in the background, holding plates, smiling, unnoticed. I pinned them to the fridge side by side. Then I wrote a sticky note beneath them. This is where I stopped letting them hold the camera. Across the room, a blank wall stared back at me. Not empty, ready. I pulled out my phone and started mapping out a shoot. Just me. No filters, no perfect lighting, just truth. The email hit my inbox at 7:06 a.m., just as I was finishing my second cup of coffee. Subject line: Activity notice, confirmed co-borrower access. I didn't recognize the sender at first, some generic bank email that usually ends up filtered out with the rest of the junk. But the words co-borrower snagged in my brain like a fishhook. I opened it. Apparently, a joint account I hadn't touched in years, one I barely remembered existed, had been flagged. There was an attempted home equity line of credit request. The system required both parties' identification to proceed. The system had been overridden. I didn't breathe for a moment. Then I clicked the details button. The names listed: Marigold Vale, Bryony Wilder, and me. The realization didn't come like thunder. It slid in like cold air through a cracked window. That account was created years ago, when I was naive enough to believe in family financial planning, when trust was still a word I hadn't learned to distrust. I called the bank immediately. The representative confirmed there had been a request, pending verification. They needed my consent. I gave them a flat no, then hung up, sat still, and stared at nothing. They thought I wouldn't notice, or worse, they thought I would and wouldn't do a thing about it. I drove straight to Mom's house. No warning. I wanted her to be caught off guard, just like I had been. When I pulled up, she was in the front yard, kneeling in her garden bed, wearing the same wide-brimmed hat she always wore during spring planting. But this wasn't spring. It was late August, and the ground was dry and hard. She looked up, smiled faintly. Well, this is a surprise. I walked across the lawn without speaking. When I stopped just feet from her, she stood slowly, wiping her gloved hands on her apron. We need to talk, I said. If this is about the other night, it's not, I cut in. It's about the HELOC application you just filed using my name. Her face didn't even flinch. Oh, that. Honey, don't make this dramatic. It was just an inquiry. You used a dormant joint account and submitted my name without telling me. She sighed. We were going to talk to you. Bryony's been... If you ever use my name again without my explicit consent, I said, voice steady, I will involve legal counsel. She blinked. Just once. Delphine, don't be so... aggressive. It wasn't meant to be malicious. Intent doesn't erase action, I said. At that moment, Bryony stepped out from the front door, holding something small in her hand. She sauntered over, flipping the object between her fingers like a coin. I thought you might want this back, she said, extending her palm. My graduation bracelet, gold, minimal, with a tiny D engraved on it. A gift from our late father. One of the few things he gave me directly. Mom said I could have it. You never wore it anyway. I didn't take it, just looked between them, chest tight. That's not a hand-me-down, I said. Bryony rolled her eyes. It's jewelry, not a crown. Relax. I turned and walked back to my car without another word. That night, curled up on my sofa, the city lights blinking through the blinds, I received a message from Aunt Cheryl. Hey, sweetie. Your mom says you've been difficult lately. Is everything okay? My fingers hovered over the screen, then slowly typed. Define difficult. No reply. I opened our family group chat and scrolled back. Subtle comments over the last week. Bryony's vague complaints, Marigold's passive phrasing. Some of us are just trying to keep peace. It's sad when some people shut everyone out. I hadn't realized how deep the prep work ran. They weren't just covering their tracks, they were planting landmines in the narrative, making sure if I ever spoke out, no one would believe me. It was elegant, in its own grotesque way. I called Soraya. She answered on the first ring. They tried to leverage my name, I told her. They what? I explained. The application, the message from Cheryl, the bracelet, all of it. At what point, I asked, does silence stop being maturity and start being complicity? She was quiet for a beat. The moment you feel used, she said. That's the point. The next morning, I sat down with a yellow notepad and began listing every legal tie I had to my family. Joint accounts, emergency contact forms, power of attorney documents I'd signed in good faith. It was longer than I expected. I made 3 columns: remove, freeze, revoke. By noon, I'd booked a notary appointment and submitted the first batch of changes. Marigold and Bryony were officially removed from my estate. No access, no rights, no name privileges. That afternoon, I emailed my financial advisor and requested credit monitoring on all my accounts. Two-factor authentication was added. Passwords were changed. Bank contacts updated. As I moved through each step, I remembered a childhood moment. I was 9. I'd saved money from babysitting and birthdays, maybe $30 in total, and put it in a shoebox. One day, it was gone. I asked Mom. She said she took it for groceries. "You live here too," she'd said. That moment, I realized, what's yours is mine, had always been a one-way street in this house. Once everything was done, I drafted a message. Simple. Cold. You are not to use my name, access my accounts, or authorize anything in my name going forward. There will be consequences. No love, Delphine. No soft landing. I hit send. Marigold replied minutes later. A single thumbs-up emoji. That told me everything. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a lapse in judgment. This was deliberate, and it wouldn't stop unless I made it stop. That night, I got a notification from Experian. Someone had attempted to open a personal loan using an SSN that partially matched mine. The alert was flagged because I had already added protections. I didn't panic. I took a screenshot, sent it to Soraya with one sentence. "They're still trying." Then I turned off all the lights, walked to my window, and stared out at the skyline. I didn't feel fear. I felt precision. Next time, I wouldn't just block them. I'd bury the paper trail, with proof. The voicemail came through while I was brushing my teeth, the vibration of my phone rattling against the bathroom sink. I glanced at the screen. Marigold. Again. I almost ignored it, but the preview line caught my eye. "She's being impossible." I pressed play, not expecting much, but this wasn't a message. It was a pocket-dialed recording, background chatter and half-whispers between my mother and someone else. "Maybe we just list her on the house loan," Marigold said, her voice calm, dispassionate, almost bored. "She won't notice. She never checks those things." Then, silence. A door closed. The call ended. I stared at the mirror, toothbrush frozen in my mouth. Not notice? Not check? That calm, casual tone stung more than any shouted insult. There was no guilt, just assumption. She wasn't asking for help. She was assigning responsibility, again, without permission. I rinsed my mouth and grabbed my keys. I didn't know exactly what I was driving toward, but I knew I had to confirm what I already suspected. I wasn't being selfish. I was being set up. The drive to the bank took 20 minutes, most of it spent rehearsing what I would say. I walked in with my usual confidence, heels clicking against the tile. The loan officer, a man maybe 10 years younger than me, smiled politely. "How can I help you today?" "There's been some activity on an old account. I need clarity on whether my name's been tied to any new loan paperwork. Possibly a home equity request." He blinked. "Do you have the account number?" I gave him what I remembered. He typed. His expression shifted. "There was a pre-qualification request submitted under that account. You were listed as a co-borrower." My stomach dropped. "I didn't sign anything." He nodded slowly. "It looks like a preliminary submission. No final approval yet. We just need one more verification to proceed." "I'm not verifying anything." He leaned back, clearly used to this sort of discovery. "You'd be surprised how often this happens, especially in families." "No," I said, my voice flat. "No, I wouldn't." Later that afternoon, I sat across from Soraya at a cafe, my coffee untouched. "She tried to put me on a second mortgage," I told her. Her brows rose. "Without consent?" I nodded. "She's tying you to her sinking ship," she said. "That's not just manipulative. That's financial abuse." We spent the next hour setting up protections, freezing credit, alerting bureaus, adding flags to my SSN. "I'm done playing defense," I said. "They keep doing things because they assume I won't fight back." "You're fighting now," Soraya said. "Let's make it count." The next day, I received a message from Carly, a college friend I hadn't spoken to in months. Hey Del, your mom came by the clinic this week. She said you've been unstable lately. Is everything okay? The words felt like ice down my spine. I sat with it for a moment. Marigold wasn't just messing with my finances. She was building a preemptive character assassination campaign. She was laying bricks for a story in which I was the irrational one, the daughter who lashed out, the woman who lost control. I flashed back to high school, asking about why Bryony got new clothes and I didn't. Don't make everything a scene, Mom had said. You're so dramatic. I typed to Soraya. They're not just trying to steal my credit. They're trying to steal my character. She replied instantly. Truth isn't enough anymore. You need a record. I opened a folder on my computer. Title: Family Manipulation, Documented. I booked a consultation with a financial protection firm. Neutral space. Glass walls. Their conference room smelled like leather and eucalyptus. I told them everything. The voicemail, the bank, the bracelet, the social smears. They listened carefully, asked follow-up questions like I was giving sworn testimony. I provided emails, screenshots, timelines. We ended with them recording my formal statement, voice clear, tone sharp. I left feeling stable, not vindicated, but armed. Back home, I uploaded everything to a private cloud, labeled it, sorted it, made backup copies. I won't be the villain in their story, I whispered. That weekend, I bumped into a woman I barely knew, an acquaintance from church. We stood in line at the grocery store. She smiled too kindly. I've been praying for you, she said. I blinked. Praying? Well, your mom said you've been going through a lot, said things at work have been tough. There it was, the script, already spreading. I smiled, tight and professional. Thanks for your concern. I'm doing just fine. She nodded, not believing a word. When I got home, I typed a new email. Subject line, clarification. It went to every extended family member in my contacts. If you hear anything about me from anyone but me, assume it's a lie. I hit send and didn't wait for replies. I wasn't asking anymore. That night, I created another folder. Exit strategy, legal version. Inside, I copied the statement, the recordings, the screenshots, the emails. A new voicemail blinked on my screen. Marigold. I didn't listen, not right away. When I did, it was more of the same. Vague emotion, twisted language, no ownership. I just wish things could go back to the way they were. I paused the audio and typed out every word, saved it. Then I looked at myself in the mirror, tired, steady, aware. I wasn't the one losing control, I said aloud. I was the one gaining leverage. The call came mid-morning, right as I was reviewing a contract on my second screen. I didn't recognize the number, but the area code matched the attorney who handled my father's estate years ago. Curiosity, or dread, made me pick up. Delphine, the voice greeted me, calm and practiced. This is Richard Calloway. I handled your father's trust, if you recall. I remember, I said cautiously, pushing aside my coffee. I wanted to inform you, he continued, that the legacy fund your father earmarked for you, around $75,000, has been fully withdrawn. For a few seconds, I didn't register the words. Withdrawn? By who? He paused. Marigold Vale. She presented identification and power of access, old documents, but still technically valid. She said it was an emergency, something about Bryony spiraling. My stomach clenched. It was meant for me. That fund had my name on it. Yes, and your father was specific. But without a full revocation clause, and given that your mother had partial control of the executor designation, it became ambiguous. I hung up shortly after, politely, but coldly. Then I sat very still. My legs were numb, my palms clammy. Not only had they robbed me, they'd done it with the kind of ease that only comes from practice. I didn't wait. I called Marigold that evening. She answered on the second ring. You stole from me, I said, skipping any preamble. Oh, Delphine, not this tone again. Don't, I cut in. Don't soften it. Don't reframe it. You took the legacy fund. I reallocated it, she corrected, for family survival. Bryony was in crisis. You don't know what it's like to watch your child fall apart. I am your child, I snapped. There was a beat of silence. You don't have kids, she said, suddenly cool. You wouldn't understand. It wasn't even about money. It was about erasure, again. I wasn't considered a daughter. I was a resource. You always had enough, she added. Bryony needed it more. Apparently being responsible makes me expendable, I replied. She didn't argue, she just hung up. I stared at the dead screen, Soraya's words echoing in my mind. Moral debt is often harder to pay than financial debt. That night, I was still reeling when a message landed in my anonymous inbox. It was from a burner account. No photo, no name, just 3 screenshots. They were from an online betting app. Bryony's profile, username included. And I recognized it instantly. Our shared childhood nickname, one I hadn't heard in years. Lil B88. The timestamps on the activity log? Just 2 days ago, after the withdrawal, after the supposed intervention, after the lie. She hadn't used the fund to get clean. She'd used it to double down. The anger didn't rise like a scream. It settled like sediment. Heavy, unshakable. I downloaded every screenshot. Opened a new folder. Bryony, active gambling. Collected timestamps, app details, the name of the payment processor. I wouldn't confront her yet. I'd document first, because I wasn't going to yell. I was going to dismantle. The next morning, I drove to 3 separate financial institutions where my father had once held accounts. I requested records, signed release forms, explained my connection. At the 3rd location, the manager pulled me into a side room. Your father's name was used to authorize a posthumous transfer, she said, frowning. It raised some internal flags, but it was processed. When? I asked. 3 months ago. I felt the wind leave me. 3 months ago, I was still sending birthday cards, still showing up. I called Soraya from my car. She didn't need more than 10 seconds. We'll start with a cease and desist, she said, then move to litigation if needed. She's misused executor rights. Marigold won't stop, I told her. She doesn't need to, Soraya replied. She just needs to hit a wall she can't climb, and that wall would be me. That night, I sat down and composed a message, a long one. It wasn't emotional, it wasn't poetic, it was policy. You no longer have access to me, emotionally, financially, or legally. This isn't a phase, this is a boundary. I attached the letter to an email, copied Soraya, added documentation. I didn't include a signature. That wasn't necessary. Then I closed my laptop and pulled out my phone, opened my camera app. I hit record. July 28th, 2025, I said aloud. I looked into the lens. I'm not doing this for pity. I'm doing it to remember what my voice sounds like when I'm done begging. I saved the video in a folder called Truth Archive. 2 hours later, my phone lit up again. Bryony. I stared at her name for a full minute before declining. She left a voicemail. I didn't want to listen, but I did. You think this makes you better? Her voice spat, already thick with blame. You think keeping receipts and playing victim puts you on some high horse? You'll be sorry. I paused, rewound, played again. You'll be sorry. I forwarded the message to Soraya. Then I whispered, not to her, but to myself. If they thought I was dangerous with silence, wait until they meet me with evidence. The email landed in my inbox just before noon, sandwiched between a CVS coupon and a calendar reminder to renew my license. The subject line was stark. Credit application. Verification required. I hadn't applied for anything. I clicked. Someone had attempted to open a new credit card in my name. The email address listed wasn't mine, but it was familiar. A variation on my college email, altered by a single number. The listed home address? Marigold's. For a moment, I just sat there, blinking at the screen. This wasn't shock. It was confirmation. I wasn't imagining it. They were still trying. I called the bank. The application was denied, the representative explained politely. But the system automatically flags partial matches to previous accounts for your protection. I thanked him, hung up, and stared at the wall across from me. This wasn't just manipulation. It was identity warfare. The rules had shifted. This wasn't about misunderstanding anymore. It was strategy. Well, that afternoon, I met Soraya at her office. She was already halfway through her lunch when I walked in, holding the printout of the fraudulent application. "You were right," I said, sliding it across her desk. "They're escalating." She didn't ask who. She didn't need to. Within the hour, she'd initiated a digital trace. The IP used for the application was linked to a residential address in the city. Bryony's. "Tell me something," Soraya asked, not looking up from her screen. "Did she ever have access to one of your old laptops?" "Yes, the one I used in college. She borrowed it after her divorce. I never got it back." That explains how she got the security questions right. This isn't just about access, Delphine. She didn't just steal your name, she stole your blueprint. I swallowed hard. The sense of violation ran deeper than the paperwork. It was the idea that someone who used to braid my hair knew the contours of my life so intimately that she could forge me. We filed an official fraud report with the FTC. Soraya placed a permanent freeze on all future credit pulls tied to my social security number. Then she looked at me, expression unreadable. "They're not just after your money anymore," she said. "They're rewriting your signature." The next day, my phone rang again. This time, a number from a local nonprofit I'd never heard of. I let it go to voicemail. "We just wanted to say thank you for your generous pledge, Ms. Vale," the woman's voice chirped. "It meant the world to our scholarship program." "What pledge?" I called back. After a short and awkward conversation, I pieced it together. Marigold had made a public donation in my name. Not a small one either. Several $1,000s pledged in my full name, Delphine Vale, with the added detail that I was reconnecting with family through community giving. It wasn't the money that enraged me. It was the narrative, the image. I wasn't just being used. I was being sculpted into a lie. I wrote a professional letter to the nonprofit, explaining the situation and requesting all public content bearing my name be removed. To their credit, they acted swiftly and issued an apology. But the damage was done. Later that evening, I opened Facebook. A new post from Marigold had gone up hours before. A family brunch. My name was tagged in the caption. "Nothing more sacred than family," it read. "Grateful for healing." I wasn't at that brunch. I hadn't even known it happened. But there I was, tagged as if I had sat smiling next to her over quiche and mimosas. My inbox was full. Friends and old co-workers reaching out with congratulations. "So glad you and your mom are good again. Happy to see you two found your way back." I sat frozen. They weren't just rewriting history. They were broadcasting it before I could even speak. I began screenshotting everything: the brunch post, the donation receipts, the tagged photo. I downloaded them into a new folder: Narrative Manipulation, Evidence. I wasn't going to argue. I was going to document. By the end of the week, Soraya and I had drafted a formal cease and desist notice for both Marigold and Bryony. The language was firm, legal, but not explosive. We were playing chess, not dodgeball. "I want to go on the record," I told Soraya. "No more vague boundaries. I want to state publicly that I do not authorize any use of my name, image, or implied involvement." We crafted a statement together. One line in particular felt like an incision. "I am not affiliated with any representations of family unity shared by Marigold Vale or Bryony Wilder, nor do I condone the misuse of my name or image in public or private forums." I sent the statement to the nonprofit, my alumni association, the local community center, and anyone else who might have been roped into their fiction. For the first time, I wasn't waiting to be hit. I was throwing the first stone, methodically and in full control. That night, I received a message from an anonymous Instagram account. No profile picture, no followers, just one message. It was a screenshot of a group text: Marigold, Bryony, and 2 cousins. The message read, "She always makes herself the victim. Watch her post something again. She lives for it." Another reply: "It's kinda sad. She used to be the nice one." And one more: "Let her bury herself in her little lawsuits. She's probably got a spreadsheet for her tears." Underneath, the anonymous sender had written, "You didn't hear it from me, but you need to prepare for what's next." I stared at it, saved the image, filed it. Then I opened my laptop, added it to the digital folder. sat back, exhaled, and said it out loud to the quiet room. If they want a narrative war, they're about to find out who owns the truth. The voicemail came while I was sorting through mail on my kitchen counter. I almost deleted it without listening, but something in the preview text caught my eye. "We need to talk. Bryony is in trouble again." I didn't press play right away. I stood still, hand frozen on an envelope, and let those words hang in the silence. It wasn't concern. It was setup. Again. I played the message. "Delphine, it's Mom. We need to talk. It's Bryony. She's gotten herself into a mess, and Can we meet? I promise it's not about drama. We just need a conversation. Please call me back." The tone had shifted. The edge was gone, replaced with something softer. Not quite desperate, but leaning toward it. I forwarded the message to Soraya before calling back. "I'm not meeting them at the house," I told her. "Public space, daylight, exit route." We agreed on a cafe in Montclair, open air, crowded enough to avoid scenes. They arrived late. Marigold in a pastel sweater set, Bryony in oversized sunglasses, and that faux innocence she wore like lipstick. Neither of them ordered anything. "Thank you for coming," Marigold said, sliding her purse closer like she was about to unveil a contract. Bryony fidgeted. "It's just for a while. That's all we're asking." I didn't say anything. Just sipped my iced tea. Marigold exhaled, already frustrated. "The house is gone, Delphine. Foreclosure finalized last week. We've been staying with Cheryl, but it's tight. She has grandkids." I nodded, slowly. Bryony leaned in. "We thought maybe we could stay at your place, just until we figure things out. I mean, come on, you've always been the responsible one." The word lodged in my throat like a splinter. "You never asked me to be responsible," I said evenly. "You told me it was my job." Marigold's lips thinned. "This isn't the time for resentment. We're family." "No," I replied, calm. "Family doesn't lie. Family doesn't steal. What you're asking for isn't refuge, it's convenience." They didn't leave immediately, not before I laid out my terms. "If you want to stay anywhere near my name, my property, my address, you'll sign a lease? You'll pay rent up front? Background checks? Documentation." Marigold stared at me like I'd slapped her. "You'd make your own mother pay to stay in your home?" I smiled slightly. "You said I wasn't family anymore. I'm honoring that." Bryony laughed bitterly. "You always wanted to be better than us. Now you think you're royalty?" "No," I said. "I just think I'm not your safety net." Around us, a few patrons glanced up, sensing tension. I didn't care. Marigold stood abruptly, her chair scraping the pavement. "This is cruelty." "No," I said again. "This is consequence." 3 days later, they showed up anyway. Luggage in tow. Unannounced. I was returning from a grocery run when I saw them standing in the lobby of my building. Bryony wore designer sunglasses. Marigold had on pearls. They looked ridiculous. "I have the paperwork here," I said, pulling a folder from my tote. "Lease terms, standard tenant agreement. It's already filled in." Bryony scoffed. "We're not tenants." "Exactly," I replied. "You're strangers trying to access property you don't own." Marigold stepped forward. "Delphine, I'll give you 5 minutes to sign. After that, security will walk you out." They didn't sign. I turned and walked away. Behind me, the front desk called for building assistance. I didn't look back. Back upstairs, I pulled the mail from my box and spotted a young woman standing by the elevator. She smiled nervously. "Hi, are you Delphine? I'm Erin, the nurse, from the rental site?" "Right," I said. "Unit 2B. I've got the keys right here." I handed them over and watched her face relax. She was young, eager, respectful. "Let me know if anything needs fixing," I said. "I keep the place clean and quiet." "I really appreciate this," she said. "You have no idea what this means right now." I did. I smiled and stepped back into the elevator. That space wasn't for chaos anymore. It was for someone who respected boundaries. That night, I sat on the couch with a glass of wine and opened Instagram. I typed one sentence into a plain black text box. Family is not defined by blood, it's defined by boundaries. I hit post. The reactions came quickly. Likes, shares, messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. I needed this. You said what I couldn't. You're brave. Then came the text from Marigold. So this is how you embarrass us? I didn't reply. I took a screenshot, added it to the growing archive. This wasn't about shame. This was documentation. I stood by the window later that evening, watching the lights of the city flicker like distant stars. My reflection stared back, calm and whole. I whispered, not for anyone but myself. This time, I wasn't burning bridges. I was burning the blueprint they used to build their version of me. I knew something was off the moment I pulled the thick envelope from the mailbox. No return address, just a law firm label slapped across the front. I tore it open before I even got back upstairs, my palms suddenly clammy. Inside was a hefty draft, nearly 30 pages, titled Co-Ownership Agreement. I froze in the middle of my living room, papers spilling onto the floor like confetti at a funeral. Marigold had hired a lawyer. No warning, no discussion. Just a legal document claiming shared ownership of my condo, citing maternal financial investment at time of purchase. I had to read it 3 times before it sank in. No panic, no shouting, just a cold stillness creeping up my spine. I gathered the pages, scanned each one meticulously, and emailed everything to Soraya with a simple subject line. They've lost their minds. This is extortion in broad daylight, Soraya said flatly when we met in her office later that day. They're not even pretending anymore. They're banking on your silence. I nodded, tension coiling in my chest. So what's our move? Soraya laid out a new stack of papers between us. We hit back. Cease and desist, plus a formal warning will escalate to defamation if they keep pushing this narrative, and I want you to sign a public declaration of independent ownership. We'll file it immediately. I took a deep breath, memories flooding in of the day I first held the keys to this condo, every inch of it built from my sweat. 2 jobs, cutting corners, no handouts, and now they wanted a slice? Send copies to the building manager and HOA. I don't want any distant cousin showing up with a claim to my kitchen sink. Soraya smirked. This place isn't just your home anymore. It's your battle line, and you just drew it in permanent ink. That night, as I was shutting down my laptop, a voicemail popped up from my mother. I didn't open it right away, just stared at the screen, fingers hovering. Then I hit play. Sweetheart. Her voice cracked. I don't understand. Why are you doing this to me? I raised you. I loved you. The crying was heavy, almost theatrical, but not once did she mention the contract, not the lawyers, not the condo, no explanation. I played it 3 times, listening closely, but all I heard was grief over lost control, not grief over losing me. I sat for a long time, phone on the table, chest tight. I didn't cry, but the guilt slipped in, quiet and uninvited. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window. Shadows danced on the wall while memories crawled in. I thought back to when I was 16, summer break, and refused to give up my part-time job to babysit Bryony full-time. Her words back then, money doesn't matter more than family. Or are you too good for your own blood now? Same playbook, guilt as leverage, emotion as a muzzle. I pulled out my leather-bound journal and scribbled, "Love without respect is just a prettier kind of trap." Then I uploaded the voicemail into my legal archive, not out of spite, out of self-defense. The next morning, my phone buzzed while I was making coffee. Unknown number. Hello? Hi, this is Amanda, Tony's wife, your cousin. Her voice was hesitant but warm. I just wanted to say, I saw what your mom tried to pull. That's not okay. That's not right. I blinked. Amanda and I had only met twice, barely acquaintances. I wasn't going to say anything, she continued, but seeing that document and hearing the things she's been saying about you, It didn't sit right with me. You're not alone. I held the phone to my ear, stunned. A crack had opened in the wall of silence, and someone, unexpected, unprompted, had chosen to see me. Thank you, I said, voice low. Really? Thank you more than you know. After we hung up, I sat still for a long moment. The truth, it seemed, was starting to seep out. The story they'd spun for years was unraveling. Quietly. Inevitably. Later that afternoon, I got a message from Sarah, an old family friend and one-time confidant of my mother. Just a photo, no caption. It showed Marigold sitting alone at a church fundraiser, surrounded by empty chairs. Her posture was tight, both hands gripping her purse like armor. People passed by, some glancing, none stopping. Beneath it, a single line. An empty table for someone who once had every ear in the room. I stared at the image, emotion tangled and knotted. No triumph, no victory lap, just distance, clarity. And then I whispered to myself, the words falling out before I realized I'd thought them. It wasn't revenge I was after. It was clarity. And now that it's here, I don't know what to feel. It wasn't even 9 a.m. when a message pinged into my inbox with just a YouTube link and the words, "You need to see this." I clicked it, thinking it'd be another clickbait reel or maybe a forwarded podcast. But instead, my mother's face filled the screen, and Bryony's, sitting beside her, both teary-eyed. The video was titled, "We Made Mistakes, A Family's Journey to Healing," and it was posted from Marigold's own Facebook account. My daughter. She was always independent, Marigold began, her voice cracking in all the right places. And sometimes, we didn't support her the way she deserved. Bryony sniffled beside her, nodding. We hurt someone we love. We didn't mean to, but we did. The comments below were flowing like a river of redemption. So brave of them to admit it. Family over everything. I hope she forgives you. I sat frozen, watching them perform like seasoned actors. But something in me said, this wasn't all there was. 20 minutes later, I received another link from the same friend. They uploaded the unedited version by mistake. It's been deleted now, but someone saved it. This one started the same sobs, the same shaky confessions. But when the tears dried and the camera was still rolling, Marigold leaned back and said, "That should calm things down. Now we wait." Bryony didn't even blink. She just replied, "Think we should schedule the follow-up post for next week?" I paused the video, then played that one sentence again. That should calm things down. I felt no fire, no explosion, just steel in my veins. I downloaded both versions, added timestamps, and titled the email, "Gaslight, Meet Daylight." Then I sent it to Soraya. 10 minutes later, she called. "Unbelievable," she muttered. "Actually, no, this is exactly what they'd do." "They don't want forgiveness," I said, flat. "They want applause." We drafted a legal disclaimer, ready to release publicly if the video gained more traction. Soraya advised we keep it prepared, but not post it yet. Let's see if they keep pushing the act. If they do, we go nuclear. I nodded, already organizing everything in my evidence folder. Screenshots, emotional impact logs, even third-party witness accounts who saw the post before it was taken down. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a production. 3 days later, Soraya forwarded me an email from a probate attorney in Vermont. Apparently, my late father had written a second will years before he passed. According to this lawyer, the will had been mailed, twice, but never acknowledged by Marigold. I reread the message several times before calling Soraya. "He left me something?" I asked, barely above a whisper. She confirmed. "A small cottage in upstate New York and a protected investment fund. It's all legally valid." Signed, notarized, time-stamped. I didn't know what to say. I felt conflicted. This wasn't about property or money. It was about something deeper. A message. A counterweight. I logged into the online vault. The document was there. My name, his signature, clear as sunlight on fresh snow. All these years, she had hidden this. My father used to say, "A promise is only as strong as the person who makes it." And now, the truth landed like a stone in my lap. Marigold had known. She'd read the letter. She'd made a decision to erase it. This wasn't manipulation anymore. This was theft of legacy, of voice, of who I was allowed to be. Soraya moved quickly. She filed to secure the assets, freeze any transactions connected to the fund, and requested a court-ordered review of Marigold's actions regarding estate fraud. I sat on my couch that evening, sipping tea that had long gone cold, and stared at the screen. A real estate site had photos of the cottage, small, aging, almost forgotten. But there, under property status, it read, Owner, Delphine W. Confirmed. I didn't cry, but I exhaled something I hadn't even known I was holding. Not closure, not joy, just grounding. The following morning, I woke up with a clarity that felt almost physical. I sat down with a blank document and began to write. Not a legal brief, not a takedown piece, just the truth. I titled it, Inheritance Isn't Always Money. I wrote about control disguised as care, about the silence women carry, about finding old truths buried under years of false loyalty. I didn't name names, but if you knew, you'd know. When I finished, I uploaded it to a trauma healing blog, one that I'd followed silently for years but never contributed to. I turned off notifications. I didn't watch the stats. I didn't need to. 2 days later, a friend texted me. Girl, your essay is everywhere. Comments started pouring in. This is my story too. I thought I was the only one. You gave me language I didn't have. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to scream to be heard. That afternoon, a knock at the door startled me. The mail carrier handed me a certified envelope, no return address. But I didn't need one to know where it came from. Inside, a single folded letter. I hope you're happy now. No greeting, no signature, just 7 words. I stared at it. No anger rose up, no ache, just the quiet confirmation that some people would rather rot than reflect. I folded it, placed it in my fireproof box, right between the will and the old voicemail, and I whispered to myself one last time. I didn't need her to change. I just needed her to stop defining me. I found out through a cousin I barely speak to anymore. She sent a group text with a couple of blurry photos and the caption, Such a beautiful night. Family healing is everything. Curious, I clicked through. There, in the background of one picture, was a long banquet table strung with fairy lights, cheap wine glasses lifted in mid-toast. Marigold sat at the head, a soft shawl draped over her shoulders like a crown. Bryony leaned in beside her, smiling the smile of someone who thinks she's been forgiven. The caption on another photo read, A tribute to strength, second chances, and unconditional love. There had been a dinner, a staged celebration of forgiveness, family, and recovery. And I hadn't been invited. At first, I felt the sting, not because I wanted to be there, but because they had turned the absence of my presence into the centerpiece of their story. One cousin even quoted Marigold's speech. Some choose the path of peace, others choose different directions. Different directions. That's what I was now. Not a person, not family, just contrast. Later that evening, I sat on my balcony with my journal and a glass of water gone warm in the heat. I didn't feel rage. What bubbled up instead was something more layered, insult laced with clarity. They don't need me there, I wrote. They need the ghost of me, a silhouette for their spotlight. I kept scribbling, the pen moving faster now. They've written a redemption story that only works if I stay off the page, but I don't owe them a role in my narrative. The doorbell buzzed. Soraya, right on time. We were supposed to grab coffee downstairs, but I waved her up instead. You look like someone who's either about to rage bake or rage paint, she said, walking in. Neither, just journaling. A classy kind of rage. She smiled. What's the fuel this time? I handed her my phone and let her scroll through the dinner photos and quotes. They threw a forgiveness feast without you? She snorted. How generous of them. How do you forgive people who never say sorry? I asked. Soraya didn't even pause. You don't. You stop holding them close enough to matter. We sat in silence for a while, both looking out over the city like it might offer an answer. But that moment said enough. The next morning, an unexpected email hit my inbox. The sender name made me sit up straight. Marina Reyes. Mrs. Reyes had lived next door to my childhood home for over 30 years. She was the kind of neighbor who always brought fig cookies at Christmas and never missed Sunday service. The message was short, but every word was a brick in my chest. You may not know this, but your father was proud of you. He showed me your photo the day before he passed, said you had your own place in the city, doing well. He had tears in his eyes when he said it. I read it twice, then again. Of all the people who'd taken sides or stayed silent, Mrs. Reyes was the last one I expected to hear from. But her words landed where so many others had failed. I hadn't even realized I was still waiting for someone, anyone, outside the battlefield to say, "I saw you, and I believed in you." That was the moment something shifted. Not dramatically, just a gentle unhooking of one more tether. Her note was like a small light at the end of a hallway I didn't realize I'd been walking down. By the end of the week, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't just keeping the upstate cottage, I was going to use it. It started with a few practical things: transferring utilities, cleaning out the rusted gutters, organizing a weekend trip to clear it out. But by Saturday, it became something else. I set up a small home office in one of the back rooms, brought up a folding desk, a second-hand reading chair, and started lining the shelves with books on financial literacy, family estate law, and personal boundaries. This wasn't just for me, it was for other women too. I mapped out an idea: quarterly support circles, small gatherings for women who had survived toxic family systems. Not therapy, just connection, shared stories, safe ground. I painted one of the rooms a shade of soft green, muted, warm, grounded. "It's a color nobody in my family ever wore," I whispered to myself. But I always loved it. On a quiet Tuesday morning, I sat at the dining table and opened a blank document. Not for work, not for court, for me. I started typing. "Dear Mom, I release you." It wasn't a letter meant to be sent. There was no rage left to pour into it, no list of receipts to demand repayment. I wrote simply to write, to end something on my own terms. I filled the page, sat with it for a while, then highlighted the whole thing and hit delete. I didn't need to keep it. The writing had done its job. I looked at the clean white screen and smiled. Clarity wasn't always about answers. Sometimes it was just the quiet where confusion used to live. That night, the city hummed its usual tune. Sirens in the distance, a dog barking 2 buildings away, the hum of life continuing without permission. Inside, though, everything was still. I curled up on the couch, warm tea cupped in my hands, the lights low. The couch creaked slightly as I shifted, and through the window, I watched the soft flicker of someone else's TV across the way. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel finished. I just felt mine. Not looking backward. Not waiting on a doorbell that would never ring, or a voicemail that would never play. Just sitting there, aware of the space I had built around me, and within me, that no one could touch. In that moment, I said it out loud, just to hear how it sounded outside my head. You don't always get a reunion. Sometimes you just get your peace back. And sometimes that's more than enough. The courtroom was quiet, no gavel, no grand statements. Just paperwork in triplicate and a polite nod from the judge confirming what I already knew. The cottage and the fund were now legally mine. No contest. No more waiting. Marigold and Bryony had tried, of course. They filed a challenge, claimed coercion, questioned my father's state of mind, reaching into every dusty drawer they could find. But none of it stuck. The court dismissed their appeal within 2 hearings. Lack of evidence. Lack of merit. Soraya leaned over the table and whispered, "Sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's paperwork that shuts the door." I didn't smile out of pride. I smiled because this time, they had nowhere left to knock. When we walked out of the courtroom, the wind caught my coat just slightly, like the city itself was exhaling with me. 2 days later, I received an envelope. No return address. Inside was a scanned copy of a letter, typed, signed by Marigold, addressed to the pastor of our old church. The subject line read, "Concern for Delphine's well-being." The body, full of thinly veiled slander. That I'd been struggling emotionally. That I'd become reclusive, possibly paranoid. That she feared I was making financial decisions that could harm the family's reputation. The letter was dated 2 weeks after the public apology video. It was a final act of sabotage cloaked in faux concern. Attached was a brief handwritten note from the pastor. "I thought you should know. I didn't cry. I didn't shake." I emailed it to Soraya immediately with one line. "Thank you for confirming who she truly is." Then I dragged the original into my legal archive and added a tag: character defamation, unsolicited documentation. It didn't deserve rage, just record. That night, I began dismantling the last of their access to my life. First, I closed 2 old joint accounts still lingering from years ago. One that I'd forgotten Marigold's name was still on. I updated my will. Every contact point, reviewed, revised, reassigned. No more emergency numbers leading back to Bryony. No more next of kin references tied to the woman who'd tried to erase me. I added a lifetime fraud alert to my Social Security file, just in case. My email filters were updated, phone numbers blocked. I even deleted the contact photos, clean slates where portraits used to live. I didn't do it with resentment. I did it like someone sealing the last airlock before launch. This wasn't escape, it was elevation. By Friday, I published one final blog post. I titled it, "The Cost of Being the Strong One." I wrote plainly, no names, no theatrics. I told the truth, how silence isn't always noble, how strength can be mistaken for availability, how survival sometimes means becoming your own witness when no one else shows up. The post ended with this: "You don't owe loyalty to those who thrive off your silence. Speak, even if your voice shakes." It spread faster than I expected. Shared across women's groups, trauma forums, survivor networks. I received dozens of messages, some painful, some empowering. And then came the podcast invitation, a show called Breaking the Cycle. They wanted to feature my story on their upcoming episode, Daughters Who Cut the Cord. I said yes, not because I needed to be heard anymore, but because I remembered what it felt like not to be. The following weekend, I drove up to the cottage alone for the first time. The road curved through early fall foliage, golden tips on green branches, like someone had traced light over every tree. The house stood just as I remembered, still, honest, unpretentious. I walked through the room slowly, one hand brushing the edges of the doorframes. The kitchen smelled faintly of cedar. In the bedroom, dust danced in the sunlight like memories refusing to settle. On the mantel, I placed a single photo in a new frame, me at 6 years old, in overalls and wild curls, grinning wide at the camera. No one else in the shot. No one cropped out. Just me. I stood there for a moment, staring at that smile, the one I'd spent years trying to earn back. Then I locked the front door, walked to the car, and rolled the window down. As I backed down the gravel road, I turned the radio up, letting the wind carry whatever was left behind. Not grief, not bitterness, just the sound of something closing, gently. When I returned to my condo that evening, the light was soft across the hardwood floors. I stepped inside, kicked off my shoes, and exhaled like I'd just climbed a mountain, because I had, in a way. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't hesitate. Blocked it before the voicemail could even start. I poured a glass of water, walked over to the window and looked out, not searching, not waiting, just observing. Every piece of furniture, every framed quote, every little plant I'd kept alive, it was all mine. Bought, earned, protected. The silence in the room wasn't empty anymore. It was rich, intentional. I stood in the center of it and said, not aloud but with full certainty, "They wrote me out of the story, so I became the author."